I go to gym with a guy. He's just a Tigers tragic, and at the start of the year, this is our year. Benji's back. Everything's going to be great. 0-6. Yeah. Audio level: David, Christopher, Stephen Bennett. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Great to be in Bundy. We've got a little bit to get through, but first I'd like to make an announcement. We are serious about bringing good representation to the region, someone to join Benno in taking up the fight, and hopefully someone to join Benno in changing government. And Queenslanders know that the seat of Bundaberg is the most marginal seat in the state, and I want residents to know that while the government expects your vote, we intend to earn it. And we're going to be fighting hard, and we will be putting a candidate on the ground earlier than ever before, and they will be a candidate who has a red-hot crack for this region. Someone who's prepared to stand up and fight hard, and someone who hopefully will be part of changing government in Brisbane. There will be many issues for that new candidate to take the fight up on, and as I've been listening to this community, I know how tough things are in housing at the moment. I know about the broken promises when it comes to the health system here, particularly the Category 5 hospital that was promised before the election, and that's something that Steve will be commenting about. But it is in law and order and the spiralling youth crime epidemic that I have certainly heard a massive amount of feedback on my recent visits. And in fact, I just had it just now at the cafe only a moment ago. And the figures don't lie. And today I can reveal that new figures for the Wide Bay show that unlawful motor vehicle theft is up by 34%, and break-ins to homes and businesses are up 25% in 12 months. How on earth did we get to the stage where you can have such a huge spike in a magnificent region like this in such a short period of time? Well, it's simple. 8 years ago, the government watered down the legislation, and on the back of it, we got a generation of repeat hardcore young offenders. And in the last 12 months, that has reached levels the likes of which we never thought we'd see before. And we're going to keep on pushing this because it is something that the region deserves answers on, and it is something that Queenslanders will not accept anymore. And we have done what oppositions often get accused of not doing, and that is not just pointing out the failings, but showing where we believe there are solutions. And the LNP's solutions to youth crime involve consequences for action, unshackling the judiciary and removing this nonsense of detention being a last resort, and gold standard early intervention. If we get those three elements right, we can make sure that people are held accountable, we can make sure that the judiciary is free to be able to implement the sentence that best fit, and we can turn kids around before they are holding a knife at your door, before they are ramming a police car. And we're going to keep on fighting until this community and this state gets the laws it deserves. The figures that are released are alarming, and they show that over half of stolen vehicles and break and enters are committed by young offenders, by youth, those who we need to turn around and give some sense of hope and opportunity, employment, education, aspiration, and instead we've failed them. And the fact that over half of those crimes across the state are being committed by young people defies belief. And right across regional Queensland, we are seeing a generation of young crims. The laws are watered down. They know that their rights outweigh the rights of the victim, and on the back of it, they are tearing Queensland apart.
The government has...
I might just get Bennett to make some statements, and then I'll just...
Well, firstly, big congratulations and a big thank you to our leader, David Christopher, for again putting Bundaberg on the map. David's a real friend of the region. As a minister, he was here rebuilding after the floods, and he's here very much at our beck and call, but more importantly, listening to the people of Bundaberg and the region. It is important that the nominations for Bundaberg are a reality, and as people know, for the last 2 or 3 years, we've unfortunately seen a member that's more inclined to talk the party political line and nod systematically behind every spin announcement. But we do know that he hasn't stood up when we've talked about the hospital, and make no mistake, it's going to be 2 election cycles before anyone has seen it in what the new hospital looks like. It's not what was promised. He stood by while the housing crisis continues to go on unabated, and people are still camping in cars, caravans and under bridges, and he continues to ignore the most fundamental things we're talking about today, the youth crisis. He fails to acknowledge his government's failures in all those areas, and I think that's a real disappointment. And as we travel around, we listen to people that want to talk to us about this issue. I'm reminded when they talk to me about the church surf school that got broken into last week and lost a heap of items. The people in Bargara that are afraid to leave their cars on the road. The people in Thebeban that are talking to us about break-ins, and more importantly a motorhome just last week that was smashed and unrecognisable. These are real issues on the ground that are caused by the youth of this region. It's real issues that need to be resolved, and the only way we can do that is to make sure that the LNP, with a good candidate on the ground, can get to reform the youth justice system and be more empathetic to the people of the region. This is about the people that I represent. It's people about Bundaberg that continually come to us with concerns, and it's time that we put this candidate front and centre so we can talk about real reforms that aren't going to be more of the same spin and nonsense we've seen for the last 2 or 3 years. So thanks, Dave, for coming along, putting the pre-selection front and centre. We've got work to do over the next 18 months to make sure that we are government ready, and that'll include a good candidate on the ground. We look forward to making sure that your voices, your thoughts, your aspirations are part of what Bundaberg should be and could be if we get the opportunity.
Thanks very much, mate. Thank you.
The government would say it's toughened the laws.
For 2 years, the government repeatedly said there wasn't a problem. And for 2 years, the government mocked our solution for breach of bail as an offence for young offenders. And then at the 11th hour, they adopted our legislation word for word. Unfortunately, the fact that they're not listening more broadly is the reason why they haven't adopted the other things that have been put on the table. And repeatedly, we've seen every time there's been a crisis in youth crime, the government's implemented an X-point policy, 6 or 8 or 10-point plan, but it's always missed the point. And it's the 3 issues that we keep talking about, and that is consequences for action, so that embedded in the Youth Justice Act is ensuring that the rights of the victim are ahead of the rights of the perpetrator. We must unshackle the judiciary, and there's been a lot of criticism aimed at magistrates from our own lawmakers who are implementing the laws that the state government put in place. And at the top of that list is removing this crazy provision of detention being a last resort. You're effectively asking magistrates to do their job with one hand tied behind their back because the laws the state government has set up don't allow them to implement the full suite of measures as they see fit. And the third element that I've repeatedly been speaking about, and it's what Queenslanders, including police on the front line, talk about, and that is gold standard early intervention. And the state government continue to say they spend record amounts, but they don't know what's working, what's not, what we need to be doing more of, what are the tools that we need to turn that young kid around before they embark on a life of crime. And the Deputy Leader has written to the Auditor General, and the Auditor General has confirmed that he's going to do a proper analysis into that, and that can't come soon enough. Because one thing's for certain, the government might have given up on young people, but I haven't. And I intend to give every opportunity to turn a young kid's life around before they're stuck on that merry-go-round. And this report that we've revealed these figures for the Wide Bay today show just how alarming the repeat cycle is. The number of youth offenders in Queensland has barely moved in the last 12 months, and yet the rate of crime has soared at levels we've never seen before. The number of victims have hit heights that we never thought possible. So that tells you there are a group of hardcore repeat offenders, and we've got to do something about it.
It's been claimed, though, that sending people to detention is basically sending them to crime university. Are these graduates?
And that's why I don't ever talk about just that one bit of the solution. There are many, and part of it involves gold standard early intervention. Of course, there is also the need to make sure that those who are wreaking havoc on society, those who are walking into homes with knives, that they're dealt with strongly. But the fact that we have a cohort that 8 years ago saw the law was watered down, and on the back of it, they're just part of that revolving door. And they're just mocking police. They're running, they're ram-raiding police. They're going into the car park and doing burnouts. They're goading police. They're hanging out of sunroofs, urging them to chase them. That is a broken system where there aren't consequences for action. So the state government has been failing at both ends of the spectrum. They're failing the hardcore repeat, who need to be dealt with strongly, and they're failing the pipeline, the next generation of repeat young offenders. And in the Wide Bay, those results speak for themselves. They are massive increases, and they're increases that must make every resident here shudder.
Have you got any questions there, Pate?
Sure.
We've just got, should Jim Madden step down, and why, if so, why do you think that?
Well, they're alarming allegations, but equally alarming, and Queenslanders would shake their head that the Premier seems disinterested in it. Surely the Premier would want to get to the bottom of what are really serious allegations, and the response today showed a level of apathy and a level of disinterest that the Leader of the State should set a higher standard from.
And should Jim Madden be a part of the caucus meeting next week?
Well, of course not. And to know that allegations that are this serious barely rated an interest level from the Premier, Queenslanders must look at that and wonder whether or not her heart's still in the job, because these are serious allegations, and the Premier should set a standard that shows they're serious and a message to the community that shows that she is interested in setting a high standard and is still interested in doing the job. And the response today suggests otherwise, sadly.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Any thoughts on Julian Leese's decision?
I read the statement, Russell, and I thought his statement was honest and decent, and I think he made some very favourable comments about the way that Peter Dutton has approached it as well. So I respect the decision. I respect the decision because he conveyed it in a manner that suggests that he is serious about the issue. And that's what I'm asking from every Queenslander, and that is to go into the importance of this referendum with an open mind and a level of civility and decency. And I think if we do that, we'll be better for it as a nation. And to see his statement today be done in a way without inflammatory language, being decent and honest, and to reflect that Peter Dutton had conducted himself in the same way, I think that's the standard that we want to set in this. I think that's the standard that Australians want to see. People can disagree with what their decision will be, but I only ask for two things, and that is that people to do it with a level of class and decency that he has displayed today, and also that people do it with an open mind. And if we do that, we will be better for it as a nation.
Does the LNP have a position at the state level?
I've asked all of our MPs to conduct themselves with two things in mind, and that is to be civil in the way that they convey whatever their view is, and for that view to be formed with an open mind. And so far we've seen that from our troops, and I've found that to be really refreshing. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.
Is it embarrassing for Peter Dutton?
No, I genuinely think the way that